What exactly was your role at ESPN and how did you impact it?
All right, I had a number of different roles at ESPN, which is the great thing about working at a television network because there are a lot of jobs to be done. I went there in 1982 as the first coordinating producer for SportsCenter, which is basically overseeing the producers and directors of the content of the SportsCenter shows that I was assigned. Um, I left that job after 3 years and started a program called Scholastic Sports America, which was the idea of the president of the company at the time. So I hired Chris Fowler and I started a new little production unit. I did that for 4 years and then was hired as coordinating producer for live events. And I started traveling to live tennis and boxing and horse racing events. And my job there was overseeing and hiring all of the people who work on those shows, including the talent. Who do you want? And you assign the talent to all of your shows. At ESPN, it's interesting. They divide everything up, your responsibilities by sport. So if you're adding a new tennis show, it was my responsibility. If they're adding a new set of horse racing shows, you knew exactly who to go to. It wasn't just, well, maybe you should do this, because you're working with the same organizers, you're working with the same governing bodies of that sport. So you
Right.
get to know them. Um, and so I worked for about a dozen years as coordinating producer for live event production. And then I left that to become head of production for ESPN Digital. And ESPN Digital, we helped launch ESPN 3. Back then it was called ESPN 360 as an online, non-linear digital video service. Um, and I think the impact that I had all along the way is coaching the people who I was hiring, looking to advance them, looking to, if they're an associate producer, giving them producer opportunities, looking to improve the shows, the impact that you, when you look on television and you see the shows that you're responsible for, are they better now than they were? That's an impact that you have. And then when I went over to ESPN Digital, there was a huge impact there because most of the people working there did not have live event or studio experience the way I did. So we were able to make what we were doing far more professional and have it extend out to more sports. And in the 3 years, little less than 3 years that I had that job, we increased the number of video views per day sixfold. So I think that's a quantitative way to measure impact.
So I guess my next question is, when you work for a company like ESPN, from an HR standpoint, you want to feel like you belong. So what is it like working for them?
With the HR standpoint, or
Yeah.
okay, um, it was very interesting in that I worked there for a little over 25 years, and during that time saw a variety of owners. ESPN has never been its own company. Before it went on the air, 80% of it was owned by Getty Oil, which was Getty Diversified. Getty sold to the ABC television network, so then we were ABC employees. ABC was absorbed by Capital Cities, so then we were Capital Cities ABC employees. Capital Cities merged with Disney, so then we were Disney employees. It's still now 80% owned by the Disney company. The reason I take you through that whole history is that each of those companies has a different HR set of policies. They've got a different view, a different perspective of the world. It was very different working for an oil company as opposed to a communications company, and then as opposed to an entertainment company. Um, the the biggest change, I think, would be when we were no longer Getty employees. And that was a huge breakthrough for us because then we did not have to explain to the people controlling the purse strings why we needed new tape machines, why we needed the new technology. The people from the oil business, well, you got pumps, don't you just use the same pumps? No, that kind of thing. So that changed. The and one of the other biggest changes was going from Cap Cities ABC to becoming a Disney employee, because Disney is a worldwide company as opposed to working for a national company. Disney had a different look different way of seeing things. They moved actually a lot of the accounting and financial services down to Orlando. So suddenly you were working with people who weren't in the same complex. You were working with people in Los Angeles. You're working with people in Orlando. And the Disney Corporation had different opportunities for their employees. Like they had a scholarship program started by Walt Disney in 1951 for employees. So suddenly our kids were eligible for Disney scholarships.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
actually my son, as an aside, my son won a Disney scholarship the first year that we were eligible for it, and
That's awesome.
helped pay his way to Dartmouth, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And they have a variety of different opportunities. And another interesting thing is that when you observe your 20th anniversary with ESPN or 25th anniversary with ESPN, you don't get an ESPN watch. You get a Mickey Mouse watch, or you get a Mickey Mouse statue, which really has nothing to do with sports,
Right.
but it has a lot to do with your parent company.
Yeah.
So it's very different as parent companies changed.
Yeah, oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Now, I guess, with working so much, and obviously sports isn't a 9 to 5 job, and especially in television production, so how did you balance work and family life?
I was very blessed in the timing of my career suited the timing of my life.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to ESPN, I had 2 little boys, a toddler and a 3-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a time when being around them was important. Being there with my wife around them. So my first jobs at ESPN for the first 7 years I worked there, 3 years in SportsCenter and 4 years with Classic Sports America, where I was basically based in Bristol. I wasn't going off to cover the Australian Open.
Right.
So from the age 3 to age 10 of my eldest son, I was there during the day for SportsCenter. I worked the 6, the 11, and the 2:30 a.m. SportsCenter. So I'd go into work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which meant that I was there in the morning. My wife could take courses. She was working on her second master's degree at the time.
Oh, wow.
So she could take courses in the morning. So I was there for my kids. Then when I moved over to the remote job, when I started traveling, my boys were like 11 and 9. So they were already in school. The reading stories at bedtime, kind of out of that phase. So I was very fortunate. There are a lot of families, like one of my good friends, a young man who was an associate producer back when I was there, now is a producer. He produced the Louisville versus SU football game.
Mm-hmm.
And he came up, and he's got 2 little ones, but he's traveling all around. So it is difficult, and part of what the Human Resources Department has done is they've tried to focus people's attention on, you need a work-life balance. We do not want you to get burned out here, because then you're not going to be as valuable to the company as you would be if you're burned out.
Right.
So what they try to do is balance schedules. And what they do is you may have a really intense schedule during one season. Say for the 20 weeks of the NFL season, you may have a really intense 7-day-a-week schedule. But then they get you out of the place for a month or whatever. So they're able to, because it's an assignment driven, not a how many widgets are we making every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's an assignment driven business. They're able to, all right, your assignment with the NFL has ended. I don't want to see your face in here until it's time to go to the Winter X Games or something like
Right.
that. Okay.
And what are the most valuable lessons you have gained throughout your career?
A few of them, and I try to impart them to my students. Right at the top is 100% is never enough. If you do what is asked of you, and only what is asked of you, your head will be with everybody else's head at the same level. You will be looked at as, okay, one of the people who gets it done. That means if they ask you to be there at 9 a.m., you're there at 9 a.m. If you're leaving at 5 p.m., you're leaving at 5 p.m. If you're the person who stays a little later, not till 5 a.m., but a little later to finish something up, that'll get noticed. If when you're given an assignment and they ask you to come back with video of this type of play, this type of defensive play, and while you're doing the screening, you're looking at it, you detect something. You see, there's a real tendency, or you know what? They're giving up a whole lot less first downs on third down conversion when this player's in there. All you need to do is mention that to your producer, that you observed something. Now you've done something in addition to what they asked.
Mm-hmm.
That is the major way of having your head pop up above the crowd so that when it comes time for the best assignments and for the next promotion and for the biggest raises, the people whose heads are above everybody else's are the ones who will get that reward. And I also, one of my major other recommendations, one thing I learned is never ever complain about a problem without suggesting a solution. Because if you just go into your boss to complain, you're a whiner. If you go in and complain about the same situation as the whiner, but you have a suggestion, suddenly you've made my job easier. You've helped see where there might be a solution. You're showing me that you're a thinker, that you're an innovator, that you want to be part of the team.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge difference in how people are looked at is if all they do is complain. So those are a couple of really valuable lessons.
So I am looking to someday have a huge impact in the sports industry, preferably in public relations. So what advice do you have for me that you wish someone gave to you when you were in my shoes, besides the advice you had just given me?
Okay. Find an advocate and find mentors. People who will help you, who will coach you, who care about you, care about your progress. When I was this age, when I was a Syracuse University student, I was borderline dangerous self-confident. I was, okay, I can do anything and I can make it all work and I don't need other people. Or I was great socially, but I don't need anybody to tell me what, because I know what the courses are required and I'll just take those courses. I think that my life might have been a little bit different. I mean, things worked out pretty well. I'm not complaining. But I think it's really good to have an advocate. And one of the best ways to get an advocate is by being one of those people who does a little bit more than 100%. I have some students who are very involved in campus radio and campus television here, and they're in my Newhouse class. They have done less than what is required of them in the Newhouse class. Regardless of what they do in their future, I will never be their advocate because they didn't do 100% of what I asked them. Whereby there are other students who have done more than I've asked and have excelled and outperformed others. Those people, I'll be their advocate for life. And this is a small business. It's a fairly small business. And there's no 6 degrees of separation. There's usually only like 1 or 2 degrees of separation for everybody in the business, right? So it's important to have those relationships and have the ability to, I know I got to get better. And how can I get better? Let me send this reel off to her. Let me send this piece that I just wrote off to this person and get some feedback. And I know I want to get better. That can be really important.
With the growth of technology, especially in social media, where do you expect to see sport television to be in 5-10 years from now?
It's interesting. I just did a lecture last night before my test in the sports on television class, and that's the only one of mine that I teach you haven't taken yet. All right. So okay, I teach it in the fall. Mm-hmm. It's called TRF 530, and you will see more over-the-top networks, OTT services, not networks, OTT services. And in fact, while I was lecturing last night another service was announced called Rave. And what it is, over the top means that you can receive a set of channels via your internet broadband connection, and you don't need a set-top cable box. You don't need a satellite dish. You can get video delivered to you via your computer. Think of Netflix as the example of over the top. You can be part of the Netflix network and never have to subscribe to a cable system, never have to subscribe to Verizon Fios or Dish Network, anything. More and more content providers are going to be connecting, like Disney and A&E networks and Scripps networks, which is House and Garden and the Food Network, have combined, and they're going to be offering an over-the-top service for their networks. There's a service that Sony is working on that is going to have another set of networks offered. So what's going to happen is the traditional cable system, which is a package of a bundle of networks, is going to continue to slip in its subscriptions. More and more people are doing what's called cord cutting. They're just cutting off the cable. They're cutting off because they can get so much video online, so many programs online. So you will see less of an emphasis on cable programming. Cable systems are going to become more broadband internet providers, and those via the internet you'll be able to get more over the top. As more programming is available via the internet will tell the provider how long you're on, what you're watching, far more so than a cable system can, right? Because it's all this information is there. As a result of that, you're going to see more addressable advertising. There'll be advertising that's customized to the type of shows that you watch, to your preferences, to what websites that you go to. You'll be able to, if they're doing an advertisement for Chevy trucks or whatever, and they know that you're some 30-year-old guy who watches nothing but NFL, well, that Chevy truck commercial will also tell you where in your area you can go to buy your Chevy truck. Addressable, hyper-local advertising will become more possible because of broadband delivery of programming. There are lots of other things, and as technology changes, I tell the students, the last job I finished up with at ESPN as head of digital video production didn't exist when I joined ESPN because there was no such thing.
Right.
So in the people's careers starting out now, you may very well wind up 10, 20 years from now in jobs, in services that weren't even around, that didn't exist.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting.
Yeah.
So one of my other pieces of advice is always stay in touch with developments in your field. Don't let the field pass you by. If you're aware of what's happening in the field, then you will know where the new opportunities are.
Mm-hmm. So my biggest dream is to someday be the head of communications for the National Football League. What advice do you have to break into the NFL?
You need to show, regardless of what area you're trying to break into, you need to show a passion for that content and a knowledge of the content and also an understanding of their processes, how it all works. So volunteering, joining, helping in, pitching in, wherever is possible, getting an internship with the communications group with Greg Aiello and those people, or starting at the team level and working in team communications, learning how the teams interact with the league, what's the league responsible for, what are the teams responsible for, seeing how they interact with all the other departments. One of the most important things to do in any multi-departmental field is to learn what all the other departments do and how you fit in as part of that.
Right.
So that's all really important. And I think you're starting out with the passion for the product, certainly a passion for the Giants. And if you can take that and then just grow it and nurture it and try to learn something every day, if you ever see yourself, even after a year working at whatever entry level first job you do, you get a sense of, I'm doing this over and over. I'm doing this as a routine. Push yourself away from the keyboard and start thinking, how can this be customized to the content, to the situation today, as opposed to what it was 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago? How do I make sure that I'm staying fresh? How that I see that I'm looking at all the possibilities and not just limiting myself to, that's the distribution list, that's who we send it to, this is how we write it. No. If you can make it better, make an impact, that will propel you further than those people who just do what they're asked.
So something we have discussed in Sport Management 325 this semester is the NFL struggling this season to communicate what is right to their fan base regarding the Ray Rice scandal. Because I am interested in working the field of communications and creating, of course, a good image to the public fan base, how long do you believe it will take for the NFL to gain the public's trust back?
I think a milestone is going to be when the former FBI director's report comes out. And after that comes out, the NFL will be able to assess what's broken and what doesn't need fixing. How do we improve our set of processes? How do we make this more understandable? How do we make what we do more understandable for the public and seem less random? That's been a lot of the NFL's problem. And there's also a sense I get that after having been in this position of we're number one for so long, that the very thought that you would go into a meeting with Ray Rice and his wife and not take notes, not have anybody taking notes, so that then when you go before a former federal judge who's an arbitrator and she says, well, from the only person who was taking notes, this is what Ray Rice said. He said, I struck her. The commissioner remembered, slapped her. Okay, so the processes, just as an example of, all right, we need to make sure that we take all of these cases seriously. And this is the structure of how we treat things. I think once the NFL shows that they're exercising their goodwill toward their players, toward their employees, toward their fans, and that everything is transparent. When this happens in the future, and there are going to be people who get in trouble in the future, we're all human.
Right.
People are going to get in trouble. People get into trouble in the future. This is exactly how we do it. And this is exactly what the penalty is. And these are the mitigating factors. And this is how we help our people. I think part of what people are upset with is that there was the automatic cut off from everything. You're fired from your job. You're fired from the league. You have to go away.
Right.
And most people see other people as individuals and part of the human race. And you did something wrong. You didn't kill anybody. Maybe there's a way for us to help you. And if the NFL shows this is what we do for people who did things wrong, and this is what we do for those people to help their lives, that message will be a huge way to turn the course of where the NFL is considered now into, you know what, there's compassion, there are really good people here, and there are people who care about doing things right for each person who comes up, not arbitrarily, does it right, and also that we care about everybody in the family, and we care about how they affect everybody who isn't in the family.